course, it stands out because it was a daylight sighting.
Something very unusual did happen that day. They were flying saucers. That's exactly what they looked like. Moving like I've never seen anything move before. Incredible speeds.
They were silver, metallic looking. They were basically silent.
He'd been told to tell us that you haven't seen anything. You are not to talk about this incident. And they were standing behind him listening to every single word he said. Two of them were actually armed.
With rifles?
With rifles.
What is your best guess as to what you guys saw that day? In 1966, right here in Clayton South, more than 200 students and teachers said they saw a flying saucer in the sky. Minutes later, military trucks rolled in and men in suits appeared on site. Witnesses to the event say they were warned, told never to speak about what they saw. This is Australia's biggest mass UFO sighting, and for some reason, people have no idea it ever happened. Well, I do, and today I'm here to find out what really happened at Westall that day. 1966, Australia lived under the Cold War shadow. Nuclear drills, spy planes, and UFO reports filled headlines. Melbourne suburbs were booming, and on April 6th, Westall High and the neighbouring state school were finishing their last week of the term before Easter break. Then, something extraordinary appeared in the sky. Now back then, people constantly looked up, but not just for planes, but because the world really felt unpredictable. And on that April morning, it really was. Classes were outside on the oval, perfect for cricket, footy, or apparently UFOs. It all started at about 10:15 in the morning when a student burst into science teacher Andrew Greenwood's class and shouted, Mr. Greenwood, there's a flying saucer in the sky." Today, I'm standing at Westall High with Joy Clark, one of the many students who witnessed something incredible here in 1966. What she saw that day has stayed with her ever since. Could you please take us back to the day of the sighting? Where were you? What do you remember? And
Well, I was in the science class in the school over that way, because that sports centre wasn't there at the time, and neither was that building. And was inside in the science class, and a pupil had run in and flung the door open and said, Mr. Greenwood, there's flying saucers in the sky, there's things in the sky. Well, we just burst out laughing, right, as you do. So that was okay. It was coming up to morning recess, which was 10:30. So we're sitting there, and of course now we're getting all a bit toey because we want to go and have a look. And he said, no, not till the bell goes, calm down. So once the bell went out, we went to the corridor. Don't run. We're not allowed to run in the corridors, but we walked very fast out. And then once we got outside, ran across the quadrangle there, and then out, and I was virtually over here on the field, and just stopped and just looked. And I was transfixed. I couldn't hear the noise that was happening. Apparently there were a lot of kids were yelling and screaming and also too, there was a class had been out here doing PE, so they'd seen them before anybody else.
Yep.
So I just stood there and I was just mesmerised. I wanted to take in everything I possibly could about these things. I didn't want the distraction. I just was looking.
And they were just there near the...
Well, they were over there, and then they were over there, and then they were back over there, and then they were up the top of the power lines, and they were moving like I've never seen anything move before. Incredible speeds, but they were flying saucers. That's exactly what they looked like.
You saw 3 of them?
Yes. And then they came back up in the sky and came back towards us. Now, one of the other girls that was with me at the time, we think the one in the middle looked bigger because it was closer, and the other 2 looked a little bit smaller because they were further back.
And how exactly did these crafts look? Just dome-shaped?
Yeah, dome-shaped, metallic.
Rivets or anything?
No. They looked like, it was like smooth, all sort of smooth.
To find out more about this UFO sighting, I sat down with Shane Ryan, one of the foremost researchers on this case, and the man behind the documentary Westall 66. What he told me adds a whole new layer to the story.
It was about 10:15 in the morning, Wednesday the 6th of April, the second last day of school term at that point in Victoria, and a couple of classes were out on the sports ground doing PE, and the shout went up that there was something in the sky. And one of the kids raced into one of the classrooms, a classroom that was being taught in by one of the science teachers at the school, a man called Andrew Greenwood, and she interrupted his class, which was very unusual for a kid, to do in those days to a teacher and screamed out, Mr. Greenwood, there's a flying saucer outside. And that then eventually led for that class to then go out within a few minutes. It was only 5 minutes before the recess bell anyway. And the kids all went out and they saw what everybody else on the sports ground was already looking at. And after the recess bell went, of course, the rest of the school population eventually came out, and the word got around very quickly that there was one, or according to some witnesses, 3 very unusual looking objects in the sky. And they were silver, metallic looking, basically dome shaped, like a bowl sitting on top of a plate.
Yeah, look, that is similar. Yeah, it is, but not with these, right? These 2 windows by the looks of it. It was more sort of like the lumpy bit was in the middle, like that. Yeah, like that. And sort of a row of probably lights across the bottom there. There were some sort of lights at the bottom.
They were basically silent, that they moved around very strangely, very quickly. They also hovered, and they would be in one side of the sky and then not even a second later be in another part of the sky, that they could make very strangely weird acute angles as they flew. Of course, this had the school completely mesmerised.
But it wasn't just school kids watching. Pretty soon, aircraft from the nearby Moorabbin airfield came into the skies, and what happened next looked like something out of a movie.
And then what happened, they was just sort of flying around there, and then all of a sudden, these Cessnas, little planes arrived. Now, Moorabbin, yeah, right? So they fly, and we were very used to seeing planes because we're so close to Moorabbin Airport.
And these planes had flown in not that long after the craft had arrived and seemed to be trying to chase the UFOs or observe them or follow them, but it was hopeless because these craft were just too fast and they manoeuvred in ways that were just impossible for the aeroplanes.
So they came in, and as they came in, and it was really quite amazing, it was like they'd come up to the saucer, was hovering, and then it'd get close and the saucer would just go, turn on the side and go straight up, right?
Way faster than
It was like that.
It was like a cat and mouse game.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it was like. And they did that for quite a few minutes. And the craft, I think, the aircraft in the end they had to go over there, turn around, come back and do it. And it was quite amazing. Yeah, well, they sort of came from this direction. They'd been around there already and moved over there and then came back again because they were moving constantly. They hovered a lot. But then all of a sudden they'd be bang over there and bang back there and bang up there. They're fast.
Anything you'd ever seen.
Never seen. And, it was just, it was incredible. It was just amazing. And
when they were moving, they sort of turned to their side?
Well, they did when they went up, really. When they left, that's exactly what they did. They did turn on their side, and the middle one just went straight up, and that's what it said, and just disappeared. And then the other 2 virtually did the same thing. And they just disappeared too.
At the time of the sighting, not every adult on the Oval was trying to calm the chaos. One went so far as to document it. Barbara Robbins was the chemistry teacher at Westall High in 1966. When the recess bell rang and hundreds of kids poured outside to watch the flying saucer in the sky, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed her camera and started snapping photos. According to the school captain at the time, Graham Simons, she captured several clear photos of the UFO as it hovered in the air. When the students were herded back into their classrooms after the craft subsequently took off from the Grange, Graham's job as school captain was to ensure everyone stayed within the classrooms. No students, no teachers were allowed out. But as he made his rounds in the corridor, he saw something strange. A confrontation of sorts. Down the corridor, Graham saw Headmaster Sambleby, Miss Robbins, and a man he'd never seen before. The man, he said, wore a dark blue uniform, not quite police, not quite military. What happened next shocked him. The men both demanded that Miss Robbins hand over the film, and not just the film, but the entire camera with which she shot clear photos of the craft. She tried to resist, but eventually the men took it and left. Those photos were the only known images to be taken of the Westall UFO, and were never seen again.
I was walking back from the West End. There was confrontation between Mr. Sambleby, Barbara Robbins, and a man I'd never seen before. I thought it was a police uniform, but it was just dark blue. It was demanded that she hand over not the film, but the entire camera.
Now, the crafts didn't just vanish into thin air. Many students remember the crafts hovering down from the school down to a place known as the Grange.
At least one of the objects, people are pretty clear that at least one object then flew down to a place called the Grange, which was an old rural property that by that point had been abandoned, and there was a grove of pine trees there, lots of other vegetation, and one of the craft was seen to come down and land in the vicinity of those trees.
Then they rose up and they took off, and they went back over to the Grange. That's the trees over the back there, and they disappeared down behind there. And that's when some of the kids had jumped the fence. There was a big these were all wooden fences, had jumped the fence and taken off down there to go through, because that was all bush. There weren't any houses there. They disappeared down there for quite a few minutes, and then they came back up in the sky. Now this was all going on, this was about 20 minutes. They were there for a long time.
A large cohort of the students did what everyone knew was completely against the rules. Those kids left the school property, ran across the dirt road at the back of the high school, across a big drainage ditch, down another dirt lane that led through the market gardens and down into the Grange, looking for where this object had vanished to.
We're at the Grange now. This is where you believe one of the
Yes,
front.
I think so. Over in that area, over down there a bit. Yeah, I recall it was coming in sort of from this angle to, there was one there.
And it wasn't long before others arrived at the school on the scene. People who looked a lot more official than school children and in official uniforms.
People obviously came afterwards as well and investigated, took soil samples, measured the circles, spoke to people, spoke to witnesses.
This is the caretaker's house, right? And there was a fence here, and I'd walked past the canteen and come back, and I was here, and I just saw these jeeps arrived just across the road here. So I'm hanging over the fence watching what's going on, and I said they climbed out the back of the jeeps. There were two of them, put the flap up, and then the guys got out in the uniforms, and they were in green uniforms and they had clipboards, but there were also some in camouflage gear. Now, apparently, in 1966, and it's fact that the Australian Army did not wear camouflage, but the Americans did. And there was I think some of them stationed at Victoria Barracks in the city or something.
Certainly were not Australian, because Australians were not using camouflage uniforms in those days, in the mid-60s. Nor would they have been British. But the description of the uniforms certainly matches those worn by the United States Air Force in the mid-1960s.
They were there for a while and they were talking to each other, and then they were writing, and then they jumped back in and took off. So I think that's when they went down to the Grange.
Military trucks pull up. There was Army, Air Force, and
Men in dark suits, yeah, it was police. Of course, we'd been told, don't go anywhere near the Grange, don't go near, if you do, you'll get da da da, it's all threatening, very bullying. Actually, it was very bullying.
And you and your sister later came down here to the Grange.
That's right.
And what did you see at that time?
We saw them in the much closer to the school, just opposite the primary school there. The men in the green uniforms, and they were digging up samples and stuff, and also two of them were actually armed.
With rifles?
With rifles, yeah. So they were very looking, keeping a big eye out. So that's when my sister, of course, get down and, got quite scared, actually. And she said, we've got to go, we're going to get into trouble. So we took off. So
whatever they were doing here, they were very interested in it.
Yeah, they were extremely interested in it, I think, and they wanted to just keep an eye on, make sure nobody was actually watching what they were doing.
The chaos didn't end there. By the afternoon, a special assembly was called.
At some point later on in the afternoon, after lunch, there was an assembly. Some remember it as being a special assembly that was called, but whichever it was, the content of the assembly that everyone remembers was that it was about what had happened. And the headmaster, Frank Sambleby, making very clear to the students that they weren't to talk about what had happened, that it had nothing to do with flying saucers, because there were no such things, and he didn't want anybody saying that that's what it was. He didn't want anybody talking to the media. And basically the message that most of the students who have spoken to me remember out of that assembly was that it was being quashed, and people were feeling threatened that if they did talk about what had happened, that they would be in trouble.
Of course, we had our lovely assembly, but as I said before, when Mr. Zambleby was talking, because it's sort of like a raised platform, and that's concrete, and that's where we used to have every Monday. We'd have our and do our oath to the Queen and all that stuff. And he was standing up there with the vice principal and whatever else, and behind him in the corridor, there was, because they said there was a long glass corridor, the men and lady in the blue uniform, the army, the men in dark suits, and also a policeman as well. And they were standing behind him listening to every single word he said. And I think from what he was telling us, that he'd been told to tell us that too. We were hysterical, calm down, you haven't seen anything, you are not to talk about this incident, it is not to be discussed with the press, with anybody, you just don't talk about it. You were all massively hysterical. It was a weather balloon.
That's what he said.
Really? For all those sort of people? I don't
Why would the
think so.
authorities be here for a weather balloon?
That's exactly right.
Joy's experience wasn't just contained to the schoolyard or the Oval. Later that day, outside the school, Joy and her friends were interviewed by Channel 9. However, strangely, that footage has never been seen again. You and your friends got interviewed by Channel 9 right out here after the sighting, is that correct?
That's correct. There were they just rocked up, and I can't remember totally how we got involved, but we were all here, and I think they just said, is anybody can talk to us? And it was myself and Marilyn and a couple of boys, so I think there was about 5 of us. So they were talking to us, asking us about what we'd seen and all that. And anyway, probably about, can't remember, but within 10 minutes I think it was, that there was a policeman came. And we were all sort of standing lined up here, and they were talking and we were pointing and telling them things. And he walked up to me and he put his hand on my left shoulder and he turned his back to me, or he said to me, you stop talking and you go back inside the school. And then he turned his back on me and said to the cameraman, you stop filming, and to the reporter, and you go away. And then they disappeared. So I got detention for that.
As the years went by, the memory of Westall never faded. However, speaking about it wasn't always easy.
I can't lose it. It was such an exciting event. As apart from the birth of my son, it was a really one of those lifetime experiences that never leave. It was an amazing day. It really was.
Wish you had seen this, or does it?
I feel privileged.
You feel privileged?
Absolutely feel privileged. I think I was really lucky to have experienced what I experienced. And I always say to people, because I've had some bad flack about coming out and talking about it over the years, about being drunk and on drugs and whatever, 12 and a half, yes, right. Anyway, and I always say to people that that's fine, you can have your opinion, I don't have an issue with that, right? You can think, believe what you want to believe, but I'll ask you one question. And they say, yeah, okay, so well, were you there? And what do you think the answer is? No, but I was. Myself and 300 other people. We were there. We know what we saw. It happened.
Of course, it stands out because it was a daylight sighting. When people think about UFO stories, they often think about lights in the sky, something fuzzy being seen off in the distance, something that maybe looks a bit like a drone, or looks a bit like an orb, or a bit like ball lightning, or a bit like an aircraft.
And what makes Westall even stranger is what happened next. Officials came to investigate, samples were taken of the soil, data was collected, and circles on the ground were measured.
And they were digging up stuff and using like a Geiger counter or something. They were looking for whatever. And anyway, so we got down. She said, come on, we've got to go. We're going to get into trouble. We're going to, so we took off.
Some witnesses even claimed they were spoken to by both the headmaster and these officials in suit.
The men in the dark suits did interview, not myself personally, but they did interview a couple of the kids in the principal's office, and had spoken to them and, of course, made innuendo about, I suppose you think you've seen little green men, trying to make fun of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
In the days after the event, the story didn't just end there. Witnesses were visited, not just the students, but locals too. Men who looked and acted like intelligence agents were seen walking around Clayton South. Families remember them knocking on doors and warning them not to speak of the incident. Some even calling them the Men in Black. Whoever they were, their main focus seemed to be making sure that this event disappeared from the memories of the witnesses.
I've been in contact with the children of some of the local families who lived very close to the schools, who lived in the very same street as the high school. They have told me there was a house that was literally diagonally opposite Westall High School's front gate. The children in that family told me that their parents had been visited by these men in suits, and they had heard of other neighbours also being visited by these men in suits, including a family who had been in Westall for many years, that this family was on very good terms with, friendly with, and they had run a market garden. They were running a market garden in Westall at the time, and they heard from that family as well that these men in suits had come to their place and threatened them. So the message that they all got was that you're not to talk about what had happened. The children of one particular family, they said to me that their parents, in particular their father, who worked as a railway guard and who had been in the army in the Second World War and who didn't fear things very much. He was a pretty strong, sort of brave character, they remember. And but whatever had been said to him and his wife had, for some reason, encouraged them in no uncertain terms to keep quiet about what had happened and what they'd heard and what they had seen. And ever after, whenever they tried to bring up the topic with their mum and dad about what had happened and what they'd heard, the mood would just change and their demeanour would change and things would go very cold. And as kids, they got the message very clearly that this was something that was off limits, not to be talked about.
Joy's brought a few photos from the time of the sighting. Let's talk through them. What's this one here?
Well, that's me standing in the burnt out circle that I was taken down there the day after the sighting. 2 days later, I should say, by the UFO Society that we'd done the report with. That's my school photo. That's me in Form 2C. That was the year 1966.
Mrs. Crennan's book.
Mrs. Crennan's class, and that is a copy of my report that we did with the people from the Victorian UFO Society, which was the American man, Paul Norman, the very glamorous lady, which I still remember, and another gentleman, so with my parents.
A rough sketch.
That's a very rough sketch.
Wow. How was your reaction? Excited?
Extremely.
You definitely look back at the experience with fond memories.
Oh, yeah.
It's nothing like...
No, it's nothing scary. It wasn't scary. It was one of the most exciting things that's ever happened to me.
Not everyone who spoke out about the Westall sighting was left alone, however. Andrew Greenwood, a science teacher who reported what he saw, was supposedly visited by two men at his home a few days later, one in an Air Force uniform and the other in a dark suit. What they said to him was chilling.
The hard word on him, that they didn't want him talking about what he had seen, and there weren't such things as UFOs or flying saucers, and if he continued to speak about it in public, they would make sure that he would never teach in Victoria again, that they would leak to the media that he wasn't coping with his job as a new teacher, that he was taking booze in the morning with his cereal, and that would be the end of his career.
Greenwood told them, if flying saucers don't exist, why do you care if I say I saw one? The men didn't seem to like that statement, and he never forgot their threat. Think about that. A school science teacher threatened by government agents for describing what he saw. To this day, no official explanation has been given regarding the incident by the Air Force, the Victorian government, or Canberra. 59 years later, there are still no answers. No government file has surfaced, and witnesses are still waiting to be heard. And maybe that's why Westall still matters, because it was real. Because it happened in broad daylight in front of hundreds of people, and because, almost 6 decades on, the truth is still locked away. What is your best guess as to what you guys saw that day? Do you think it was a craft from another planet? Do you think of more of a conventional explanation?
My personal belief is, yes, it was from somewhere else, definitely not this world, because of the way they moved, the speed. Never seen anything like it at all since. Yes, I do believe that. But
In comparison to the planes you
absolutely,
Yeah.
there wasn't even a patch, and I honestly believe something had to be controlling them.
Do you follow modern UFO stories at all? Are you sort of able to connect with them?
Yes, I do. Look, I'm very open-minded with lots of things. That's one thing that has happened with me too, is that I'm not as sceptical as I might have been had I not had this experience, because I sort of look at things. I look, and understand. And if the evidence is there, the evidence is there. And then especially in our case, because there was so many people and young, teachers, students, market garden workers, people, just normal people, that I'm more open to certain things might not have been before. We want verification of what we saw. That's what we want. We want someone who knows, and somebody does know, or there's documents or something. There is. It's got to be somebody that just come out and say, yes, something very unusual did happen that day, and this is what it involved. And
You're certain there's a government official somewhere out
somewhere
that knows exactly what.
Yeah, absolutely. Somewhere in somebody's department or some stashed away in the secret files. Who knows?
We know that there was a very, very senior public servant from the Department of Supply, which was the federal government department that had the task of making sure that the Navy, Army and Air Force in Australia had everything that it needed. But there was a public servant from that department who was very highly credentialed, very intelligent person, had a lot of expertise in aircraft and electronics and weapons, and that he was given the task of investigating what happened at Westall in that very week, and to write the apparently secret report about it, a report that's never seen the light of day, but which I hope still exists in some dusty, dank file somewhere, hopefully here in Canberra. Maybe there's a copy of it somewhere else, maybe Washington, maybe London, but hopefully somewhere it still exists.
Because unfortunately, we're all getting old, and some of us have passed away, and I would love an answer before I go to God, that's for sure. So we'll get there.
Although there has never been an official explanation given by the government regarding what it was flying around Westall School on April 6, 1966, members of the local community have often speculated that what may have been seen that day was just a simple weather balloon. The fact, however, is that 200 kids and adults swore it wasn't. Now, kids may exaggerate a bit, but they know the difference between a balloon and a disc. This theory also doesn't explain the silence of the craft, the heat, or the landing site where there was scorched grass. The second theory is mass hysteria. Some psychologists claim that the kids all coaxed each other into believing the same thing, that they all saw a flying disc in the sky that day. But then again, there are too many details that line up exactly. There are over 200 separate witness accounts of what the children all saw that day. Now that's a lot of consistent stories for a hallucination. The third most popular theory is that the craft may have been some sort of secret military test craft. Now this one at least feels possible. Maybe a secret Cold War testing program, maybe a secret US craft in Aussie skies. However, why would they fly it over a school? Why would they silence the witnesses, who were students at the time, and why would they silence the teachers? Something doesn't add up. I mean, where has that technology gone since? And why would they fly it over a school for it never to be seen again? And hey, maybe it really was just a balloon. But if that's the case, it was one hell of a f***ing balloon. The Westall incident isn't just a UFO mystery. It's a story about memory, pressure, and secrecy. Hundreds of people saw something that day, and just as quickly, they were told to forget about it. I'm here investigating because stories like this shouldn't be buried. Whether it was advanced tech, something unexplainable, or a cover-up, people deserve to know what really happened at Westall that day. And if something like this ever happens again in Australia, hopefully they pick a day when I'm filming. If you want more untold cases like this, hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next investigation.